In a world that worships appearances, where wealth speaks louder than character, sometimes the most powerful form of revenge is simply being extraordinary. This is the story of a woman they tried to erase. A woman who lost everything, and then quietly, patiently, rebuilt herself in the shadows. And on one unforgettable night, in a room full of arrogance, power, and prejudice, she reminded them all who she really was. They thought she was invisible, disposable, but they were about to witness the return of a legend. Manhattan. Friday night. Crystal chandeliers bathe the ballroom in golden light. Waiters move like shadows, serving champagne to New York's elite. Laughter clinks off champagne flutes. Polished marble reflects tailored shoes and designer gowns. At the center of it all, Richard Whitmore III, towering in his arrogance, drunk on scotch and status. And somewhere near the edges of the room, unnoticed until now, Kayla Monroe, 35, in a plain black uniform, cleaning quietly. A janitorial contractor, hired just 3 weeks earlier. Until crash. A silver tray, dozens of crystal glasses, shattered across the floor. Gasps. The music stops. The room freezes. Richard raises his glass. Loud. Mocking. Cruel. If she can dance this waltz better than my wife, I'll marry her to my son. Right here. Right now. The crowd laughs. At her, not with her. Kayla kneels on the cold floor, hands shaking as she picks up glass. But her eyes, calm, sharp. Not the eyes of a woman humiliated. The eyes of a woman making a decision. Dad, come on, Ethan Whitmore says under his breath, red-faced. This is disgusting. Richard ignores him, waving grandly at the DJ. Play something slow. Let's see if the cleaning lady has rhythm. More laughter. Some guests shake their heads in fake disapproval, secretly enjoying the show. Others whisper behind gloved hands. But Kayla doesn't flinch. She stands slowly, wipes her hands on her apron, looks Richard Whitmore dead in the eyes. I accept your challenge. The silence that follows is deafening. Even the orchestra, unsure if this is a stunt or a scandal, doesn't dare play a note. What did you say? Richard asks, blinking. I said, she repeats, steady, I accept. But when I dance better than your wife, you will keep your word, even if you said it as a joke. A few guests chuckle. A few murmur. The rest think they're about to witness the most ridiculous embarrassment of the decade. But no one, not yet, recognizes the fire in her eyes. No one remembers the name Kayla Monroe. Not yet. The room buzzed with laughter, champagne, and cruelty. Some guests were still chuckling, betting among themselves how long the janitor would last on the dance floor. Others took out their phones, already imagining the viral video. A few, to their credit, looked uneasy, but said nothing. Kayla stood still. She wasn't thinking about the crystal shards on the floor anymore. She wasn't thinking about the weight of 200 eyes watching her like a spectacle. She was thinking about music. About a specific piece, a waltz so familiar to her that it lived in her bones. She could almost hear it now, beneath the noise. A memory. 15 years earlier. Spotlights. Silk costumes. A stage wrapped in gold. The National Theater in Washington, D.C. And Kayla Monroe, then just 20 years old, spinning, leaping, commanding silence with a tilt of her chin. A ballerina at the peak of her power, hailed by critics as the next Judith Jamison, with the feet of Fontaine and the soul of Nina Simone. The audience had stood for 5 full minutes that night. And then, it all ended. A limo. A rainstorm. A truck that didn't see them at the intersection. 3 months in a coma. 6 months in physical therapy. And a doctor's words, like broken glass in her chest. You'll walk again, maybe, but dance. Never. The press reported her death incorrectly. Obituaries were published. Some said she retired in shame. Others said she couldn't bear to be seen imperfect. The truth. She disappeared. Changed her name. Burned her leotards. Took jobs that let her hide. Cleaning offices. Waitressing. Stocking shelves at midnight. She rebuilt herself, muscle by muscle, scar by scar. And now here she was. Not on a stage, but on a marble ballroom floor with a rich man's boots practically daring her to rise. Across the room, Ethan Whitmore stood still, lips tight, phone in hand. Unlike the rest, he wasn't laughing. He'd noticed something. Not just the confidence in her voice, but her posture. There was precision in how she stood. The balance in her feet. The set of her jaw. This wasn't just some woman bluffing. There was something deeper here. Meanwhile, Richard was drunk on the sound of his own voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, raising his glass. $500 says my wife wins. $1,000 if you're dumb enough to bet on Cinderella here. Kayla's fingers twitched. Her knees ached faintly, ghost pains from years of rehab. But her spine remained straight. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need applause. But she would remind them. "Miss," came a voice at her side, low and careful. She turned. A tall, older black man in a security uniform stood beside her, pretending to check his earpiece. "I'm Marcus, head of security. Been working here 20 years. He leaned in, speaking just above a whisper. "I saw you dance once. National Theater. 2010. You were unforgettable." Her breath caught. He smiled gently. "I thought you died in that crash." Kayla met his gaze. Something broke loose in her chest, a mixture of pain, surprise, and relief. "I almost did." Marcus nodded solemnly. "What they did to you was wrong. What he's doing now, even worse." For the first time in years, Kayla felt seen. Not pitied. Not judged. Recognized. She looked at the dance floor, then back at him. "I need a favor," she whispered. "After I dance, no matter what happens, I need you to film the crowd. Their faces. Their reactions. Especially his." Marcus looked puzzled, but nodded. "You got it. But why?" A slow, fierce smile crossed her face. "Because some people need to remember, underestimating a woman can be the most expensive mistake they'll ever make." Back at the DJ booth, Richard barked an order. "Play the music already. Let's get this over with. I want her crawling by the end of it." The DJ hesitated, visibly uncomfortable, but nodded. And as the orchestra prepared to restart the waltz, something shifted in the air. Kayla moved to the side of the dance floor, not to pose. Not yet. She started stretching. Simple movements. Subtle. Barely noticeable. But Marcus noticed. They weren't warm-ups from a YouTube tutorial. These were pre-performance exercises, the kind only professional dancers did before stepping into a spotlight. "My God," Marcus whispered under his breath. "She's really going to do it." And as Victoria Whitmore, elegant and icy, stepped into the center of the floor with smug confidence, Kayla Monroe, once a star, now a shadow, was preparing to rise again. Not just to dance, but to reclaim everything they tried to take from her. The ballroom had transformed into something else now. Not a gala. Not a celebration. But a stage for mockery, a Roman arena with hors d'oeuvres and overpriced gowns. And at the center, the crowd's attention no longer on art or architecture or charity, but on a bet. Richard Whitmore III paced like a ringmaster, drunk on power and scotch. "Let's make this interesting," he shouted. "Anyone feeling brave tonight?" He pulled a thick wad of cash from his jacket and slapped it onto a serving tray like it was a poker table. $500 if my wife wins. $1,000 if you're dumb enough to bet on the cleaning lady. Some people laughed. Others hesitated, unsure if this had gone too far. But as always in rooms like these, no one had the courage to speak up first. So the show continued. Kayla remained off to the side, still stretching. Calm. Focused. She could feel their stares, the ones pretending she wasn't human, as if she were a prop in someone else's joke. Her breathing was steady, controlled. Every movement small and deliberate, warming muscles trained long ago to obey under pressure. Across the dance floor, Victoria Whitmore stood tall and gleaming in a silver gown. She smirked as she began rehearsing a few moves. A turn here. A dramatic arm flourish there. Her dancing was polished, in the way expensive lessons make you almost graceful. "Do I really have to waste my time on this?" she scoffed toward her husband. "Come now, Victoria," Richard said with an oily grin. "Didn't you win that Waltz Club trophy last year? This should be fun. Let's show her what real society looks like." Victoria lifted her chin, full of pride. Kayla said nothing. But her mind wasn't in that room. It was in mirrors and studios. In hours of practice so brutal her feet would bleed through satin slippers. In performances where perfection wasn't suggested, it was required. And here, tonight, she wasn't here to win a trophy. She was here to reclaim her voice. Near the back wall, Ethan watched with increasing unease. His father was pushing too far. Everyone knew it. You could feel it in the nervous laughs, in the glances people were starting to exchange. Even the servers had slowed down, pretending to pour drinks while listening in. "Dad, seriously, stop," Ethan said, approaching him. Richard spun around. "What now? This isn't a game. She's just doing her job." "She was doing her job," Richard cut in with a sneer. "Now she's our entertainment. Unless you'd like me to tell your girlfriend what happened in Miami last weekend." Ethan's face went cold. His father had just threatened him. In front of everyone. Kayla saw it, heard it, felt it. That wasn't just arrogance. That was control. The kind men like Richard Whitmore had used for generations, to silence, to humiliate, to dominate. She had known men like him before. She would not bow to another one tonight. "Put on the music," Richard barked at the DJ. "Let's give this place a show." The DJ hesitated. His hand hovered over the laptop. What track?" "The same waltz. Start from the top," Victoria called out. "Let's end this nonsense." The music queued up. But before the first note played, Kayla stepped forward. The room held its breath. She didn't dance. Not yet. She simply took position. Not with arms flailing or flare. Just a quiet stance. Strong. Centered. And for the first time since the glass broke on the marble floor, the room went still. Something about her presence, subtle, composed, unafraid, felt different. Marcus, watching from the sidelines, pulled out his phone as promised. Not to film her yet. To film them. Because tonight wasn't just about a dance. It was about exposing what power looks like when it's afraid of being humbled. And what dignity looks like when it refuses to bow. The room was still, but it wasn't silence. It was pressure. The kind that fills your lungs and refuses to let go. Victoria Whitmore stood center stage, or rather, center ballroom. Her posture was perfect. Her smile sharp. Every movement, choreographed for an audience that already admired her for all the wrong reasons. She did a few dramatic stretches, showing off long limbs, arched feet, practiced elegance. But it wasn't real grace. It was polished performance, the kind that came from weekend lessons with overpriced instructors and wine-soaked fundraisers where no one dared criticize her. To most of the room, it was enough. To Kayla, it was child's play. Kayla stood in the corner, arms loose, head bowed, eyes closed. But inside, she was building something. A memory. A rhythm. A fire. Every breath was a countdown. Every heartbeat a reminder of who she had once been, and who she was about to become again. This wasn't just a dance. This was a resurrection. The music started to swell. A familiar waltz, rich and melodic, filled the air. Victoria raised her arms with a flourish and began. Her movements were technically clean, if a little stiff. She knew the steps. She'd practiced. She turned, dipped, spun, smiled for the audience like a pageant queen in pointe shoes. And they applauded politely. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was expected. At the edge of the room, Kayla slowly opened her eyes. The music played on. She wasn't watching Victoria. She didn't need to. She was feeling the tempo. Letting the sound crawl into her bloodstream. Letting the muscle memory rise from the depths of years in silence. 15 years of hiding. 15 years of swallowing her truth just to survive. Now, every second that passed, every note that echoed, was like oxygen to fire. She could feel herself shifting. Not physically. Energetically. Victoria ended her routine with a dramatic bow and a smug smile. She had delivered exactly what her circle expected. Control, class, a dash of superiority. Richard clapped loudly. Exaggerated. Beautiful. Darling. Absolutely flawless, he said, kissing her hand. The crowd clapped along, unsure if it was over, but relieved it might be. And now, Richard announced theatrically, for the surprise entertainment of the evening. Polite chuckles. Raised eyebrows. A few glasses refilled in anticipation of embarrassment. But no one was prepared for what was coming. Kayla stepped forward. Not with flair. Not with drama. With intention. Each step was measured. Grounded. Her shoes made no sound. Her body didn't flinch. When she reached the center of the floor, she stopped. Looked directly at the DJ. Same track, she said softly. But play it from the beginning. The DJ nodded, this time without hesitation. Something in her voice said, "Don't question me." Richard leaned over to Victoria, half laughing. She wants a second chance. How adorable. But the amusement didn't reach his eyes. He was starting to feel it, too. That quiet power. That unshakable presence. Not defiant. Not desperate. Disciplined. No one noticed the slight shift in her weight. The positioning of her arms. The way her fingers hovered just before the opening note hit. But Marcus noticed. From his place near the exit, phone recording steady, he saw it all. "Oh God," he whispered. "She's not just going to dance, she's going to make them feel it." And when the music began again, those first familiar notes echoing once more, Kayla Monroe was no longer in the ballroom. She was back in the light. Back in the rhythm. Back in the place where pain, loss, and judgment didn't exist, only movement. Only truth. The first notes of the waltz drifted across the room like a breeze through glass. Soft. Familiar. Elegant. But no one was breathing. Not anymore. Kayla's arms lifted, slow and fluid, her spine lengthening with a grace that didn't belong to the world of galas and shallow applause. It belonged to something sacred. The audience leaned in, reflexively, instinctively, because the very air had changed. And then, she moved. It wasn't showy. Not yet. Her first steps were deliberate. Smooth. A single turn on one foot, a controlled breath, a lift of the chin. Like the beginning of a prayer. Some guests exchanged confused glances. Where was the awkward stumble? The beginner's clumsiness? Why did her posture look perfect? And then, she floated. A series of turns that looked effortless. Suspended. Timed perfectly with the rise and fall of the music. And the laughter stopped. Completely. In the corner, Marcus watched through his phone's lens, but part of him had already lowered the camera. Because this wasn't just a performance. It was a return. The resurrection of a legend. Kayla's feet skimmed the marble like she was skating on air. Her movements weren't ballroom. They were ballet. Real ballet. Modified, yes. Fluid enough to match the waltz, but unmistakable in discipline and power. She performed a peak turn, followed by a perfectly executed arabesque, arms extended like wings, balance so precise it defied logic. People gasped. Literally gasped. She's not an amateur, someone whispered near the back. No, another said, slowly rising to their feet. She's a dancer. In the crowd, Victoria's expression soured. She had danced with pride, with technique. But Kayla danced with soul, with truth, with scars that moved as much as her muscles. Every turn she made was a confrontation. Every leap, a memory released. Every breath, a declaration. You cannot erase me. Richard stood frozen, his smirk gone. The bet. The joke. The public humiliation he planned. It was all unraveling. Right in front of him. Kayla moved into a series of pirouettes, fast and precise. 3, 4, 5 spins, effortless, until she landed, arms sweeping down in a move that belonged in the final act of Swan Lake, not in a corporate ballroom filled with cynics. Then, she leapt. A grand jeté, her body stretched in midair, the hem of her janitor's uniform slicing through the air like silk. The room went completely still. Even the servers had stopped. Even the DJ was frozen. The only sound was the music, and Kayla's breath, controlled, steady, alive. She ended the sequence with a move so unique, so signature, that a woman in the front row dropped her glass. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I've seen that before. That's Kayla Monroe's choreography." Silence shattered into stunned recognition. From the corner, Marcus zoomed in on Richard's face. The color had drained completely. "That's impossible," Richard muttered. She's a janitor." No. She was the Kayla Monroe. And she had just returned from the dead, on his ballroom floor. As the final swell of the music rose, Kayla delivered one last sequence, fouettes. Sharp, elegant spins that only the strongest, most trained dancers could perform without falling apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 10, 12. Then, she stopped. Arms lifted. Chest open. Back tall. Her body said, "I am whole again." Her eyes said, "I never needed your stage. You just needed to see me." The music faded. Silence. Not the awkward kind. The holy kind. The kind that only follows something undeniable. Then, clap, 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 clap. The room exploded into applause. People stood, cheered, shouted her name before they even remembered how they knew it. Bravo! Incredible! That was art. Kayla didn't bow. She didn't need to. She just stood there, arms by her side, eyes still, breathing calmly. As if nothing had happened. As if everything had. And in the crowd, Richard Whitmore stood trembling. Not with anger. With fear. He had just been defeated. Not by power. Not by politics. But by a woman he tried to humiliate. A woman who didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't flinch. She danced. And in doing so, reminded them all. You can try to bury the truth. But it will rise. And when it does, it will shine brighter than you ever imagined. The standing ovation hadn't ended. If anything, it was growing. Some guests clapped through tears, others just stared, stunned by what they'd just witnessed. It wasn't a performance, it was a revelation. A woman once mocked, now seen. Not because she demanded attention, but because she earned awe. In the chaos of applause, Richard Whitmore III stood frozen. He looked like a man who had just survived a car crash, rattled, confused, grasping for explanations that no longer worked. She must have learned those moves from YouTube or something, he mumbled, to no one in particular. But no one was listening anymore. Marcus, still filming, stepped forward. Calm. Steady. Like a soldier delivering classified information to the world. He raised his voice just enough to cut through the applause. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? The room slowly quieted. All eyes turned to the man in the security uniform, holding a phone like it was a torch in the dark. Allow me to reintroduce tonight's unexpected guest, Miss Kayla Monroe, former principal dancer with the American National Ballet. Gasps. Actual gasps. And then, silence. The name fell over the crowd like a thunderclap. One woman clutched her necklace. No, that's not possible. Kayla Monroe died in a car accident years ago. Victoria's eyes darted between her husband and Kayla. No, she disappeared, someone else whispered. They said she could never walk again. Kayla finally spoke. Her voice clear, calm, sharper than any insult thrown at her that night. The rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated. Laughter bubbled up, genuine this time. Not mockery. Not cruelty. Just the absurdity of truth crashing through layers of lies. But Richard wasn't laughing. He was unraveling. This is ridiculous, he barked. So what? She danced. That doesn't mean anything. It was all just a joke. Kayla turned her gaze on him like a blade. A joke. She looked to Marcus. Would you play the recording, please? Marcus nodded and tapped play. The ballroom filled with Richard's own voice, loud and unmistakable. If she dances better than my wife, I'll marry her to my son. Imagine the heir to a billion-dollar empire marrying the help. Then more, from earlier in the night. Let's see if she can even move to rhythm. $500 if my wife wins. $1,000 if anyone bets on the maid. She'll be on her knees begging by the end of it. Each line hit harder than the last. Some guests looked away. Others stared at Richard like they were seeing him for the first time. The mask was off. Kayla stepped forward, her voice steady and low. You made a public wager. With conditions. in front of over 200 witnesses. You degraded me. You mocked my skin, my job, and my worth. But I danced. I accepted your terms. And now I expect you to keep your word. Richard tried to laugh. You seriously expect me to? But then came a voice from his right. I'll do it. Ethan. Richard turned, stunned. His son had stepped forward, calm but firm, looking at Kayla with something his father had never shown her. Respect. Miss Monroe, Ethan said, I'd like to formally apologize for my father's behavior. It was shameful. Richard exploded. Don't you dare apologize to her. Don't you embarrass this family. Ethan interrupted him, eyes blazing. You embarrassed this family, Dad. You did that the moment you turned your ego into a weapon. Kayla held up a hand. I don't want pity. I want accountability. She turned to Richard again. So what will it be, Mr. Whitmore? You said I could marry your son if I outdanced your wife. Are you a man of your word? Or just another coward hiding behind his wealth? The room held its breath. Richard clenched his jaw, his fists, his pride. He was cornered by his own words, his own arrogance, his own performance, now outshined, outclassed, and outnumbered. This is blackmail, he spat. No, Kayla replied. This is consequence. Ethan took another step toward her. Kayla, he said gently, I'd be honored to take you to dinner. Not because of a bet, but because you're the most incredible woman I've ever seen walk into this room. A pause. Then, softly, a smile. Kayla nodded. Dinner. I'll accept that. The room exhaled. Some clapped again. Others simply stood in silence, changed by what they'd witnessed. Richard. He stormed out, pale, broken, and, for the first time in his life, powerless. The ballroom was buzzing again, but this time, not with gossip or cruelty. Now it was awe, admiration, shock, and, for some, shame. Richard Whitmore had just fled the scene. His carefully curated image as a man of power, charisma, and class had collapsed in front of 200 witnesses, recorded on more phones than he could ever silence. And at the center of it all, still standing tall in her plain black work uniform, was Kayla Monroe. Not just a dancer, a force of nature. Ethan stepped beside her, still holding out his hand. A gesture of something uncertain, respect, curiosity, maybe even hope. About that dinner, he said gently. The offer's real. No strings. No bets. Just a clean slate. Kayla looked at his hand. Then at the crowd. Then back at him. And she smiled. Dinner, sure, she said. But let's get one thing straight. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like truth etched in stone. Marriage isn't a prize in someone's game. It's not a punishment. And it's definitely not something you win by humiliating people. It's something two people decide on, together, based on love, respect, trust. A few people in the crowd nodded quietly. Others looked down, embarrassed. Kayla turned to the remaining guests. The ones who had laughed. The ones who had whispered. The ones who had stayed quiet when it mattered most. Tonight, I was called the help. I was mocked for my skin, my job, my place in this room. But you know what I've learned after 15 years out of the spotlight? She paused, not for drama, but for meaning. True nobility doesn't come from your last name, or your net worth, or what school you went to. It comes from how you treat people when you think no one's watching. A ripple of stillness moved through the room. The kind of stillness that comes with self-reflection. The kind that changes people. Kayla took Ethan's arm, not as a prize, not as a trophy, but as a woman who had chosen to walk beside someone, not beneath them. They began walking toward the exit when someone called out, "Miss Monroe." She turned. It was a young woman near the bar. Nervous. Shaking. "Thank you," she said softly, "for reminding us what grace really looks like." As the applause rose again, gentler now, more human, Marcus stopped recording and slowly lowered his phone. He walked up to Kayla, pride in his eyes. "What you did here tonight, they'll never forget it." "Good," she replied, "because I didn't come back to dance. I came back to be heard." Later that night, the video of her performance, and the entire confrontation, would go viral. But in that moment, she didn't care about headlines. She had won something far greater than a bet. She had reclaimed her voice, her story, her dignity, and in doing so, she had taken back something no one ever truly had the right to steal: her place in the world. It didn't take long. Within 12 hours, the video had gone viral. Billionaire mocks janitor, gets humbled by her secret past. Clips of Kayla's breathtaking performance spread like wildfire across social media. One version had 3 million views by sunrise. Another had been reposted by dancers, celebrities, even a few politicians. People weren't just watching. They were talking. They were rethinking. By mid-morning, news outlets ran headlines like, "The return of Kayla Monroe. A humiliation reversed. A ballerina's redemption. A power, prejudice, and pirouettes." Meanwhile, in a penthouse office high above the city, Richard Whitmore III stared blankly at 5 different newspapers laid out across his desk. Each with his name. Each with his downfall. "The board has called an emergency meeting," Ethan said, standing tall across from him. "You have 2 choices, Dad: resign or be removed." Richard didn't answer at first. He just looked at his son, the same son he once tried to control through threats and shame, and saw someone stronger than he ever imagined. "You betrayed me," Richard muttered. "No," Ethan replied quietly. "You betrayed yourself the moment you decided arrogance mattered more than humanity." Within 24 hours, Richard was removed from the company. Investors pulled out. Brand partnerships collapsed. His name was no longer an asset, it was a liability. Victoria Whitmore filed for divorce and fled to Europe. The empire he built on intimidation, silence, and spectacle? Gone. And Kayla? She didn't celebrate. She created. Offers flooded in, dance companies asking her to choreograph, Hollywood studios interested in her story, even universities inviting her to speak. But the message that touched her the most came in a small envelope, handwritten in crayon. Inside was a note from her former students at a community school where she once volunteered. "Ms. Kayla, we saw you dance. We saved $23 from our snacks to help you open your own studio. We believe in you." She cried for the first time in years. Not from sadness, but from something deeper. Wholeness. 6 months later, the Kayla Monroe Center for the Arts opened in the heart of Harlem. Funded by donations from around the world. Backed by artists, educators, and, surprisingly, by Ethan Whitmore, now CEO of a restructured, socially conscious version of his father's old company. Ethan was the center's first major donor. He didn't want credit. He wanted change. Marcus stood beside Kayla at the grand opening, smiling as he watched her guide a group of diverse, smiling kids through their first ballet positions. You know what I love about this, he said. It's not just a story of justice. He gestured to the studio, the sunlight, the music, the laughter. It's a story of grace. Kayla nodded. Sometimes, she said, you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. She looked out over the room. And sometimes, people like him have to lose everything to learn who they were never supposed to be. Later that day, Ethan arrived at the center carrying a bouquet of flowers. Fresh from the garden he had planted himself around the building. He extended his hand, smiling. Dinner. Kayla smiled back. This time, not guarded. Not cautious. Dinner, she said, taking his hand. But she didn't take it like a woman rescued. She took it like a woman who had already saved herself. Because the real revenge was never about destroying Richard Whitmore. The real revenge was building something beautiful that made his cruelty look small by comparison. Through art. Through dignity. Through excellence that couldn't be ignored. Kayla had proven one simple truth. When they try to bury you, rise with grace. When they try to silence you, speak with movement. And when they try to reduce you, be unforgettable.